Welcome back to my latest prediction for World War III, China edition. China, Iran, Taiwan edition. Is China going to step in to help Iran? Nope, not meaningfully. They want a trade route going through Iran. Absolutely they do, because they want a trade route. Because the United States chokes them when it comes to trade, and they have to have a trade route. Trade is life. And they have to be able to protect themselves and protect their trade. They have to have military access to the technology that they've created, and are continuing to innovate. They need super chips. Taiwan offers super chips. But more than that, let's talk about trade. I told you in a previous video that China wants Iran for the trade. That is absolutely true, because the trade routes are shifting globally. United States and our allies are trying to build a trade route that goes up through Saudi and through Rio, into the Mediterranean, into Europe. China wants to offset our power by building a similar one that ends in Russia and then offshoots by rail into Turkey, into the Mediterranean, out into Europe. They absolutely want this. Iran has already invested in this and has completed infrastructure for this. China has funded this after India got cold feet from our sanctions and backed out. They really, really want this because they want a way to get goods up this direction without having to go through the channel that the United States primarily controls and surveils and has military bases in. So if they could partner with India and go by road down this way, they bypass all of this military intervention, all of this, these geopolitical strong arm tactics that I always talk about. They bypass all of this and they're able to just simply trade that direction. They have a sanction-proof trade route. And of course, they want a sanction-proof trade route. Who would not want a sanction-proof trade route? We want sanction-proof trade routes. Now, their alternative, in their area over here, in the South China Sea, their alternative would only really be Taiwan. And if you're wondering why not this very obvious choke point right here, it's not possible. Naval base, historic issues going on there. It's not possible. Taiwan would be their best bet. So if they aren't able to get the trade route through Iran, they're definitely going to prioritize Taiwan. And also, if they have to pick one or the other, which is not really like a clean choice, right? They don't get to choose. But if they had to prioritize where to allocate their resources, it is going to Taiwan, for sure. So as China always does when it comes to planning, what are they doing? They are quietly waiting. They're waiting for the West to exhaust all of our resources in Iran so that they can take Taiwan. Japan's not going to be able to meaningfully help. The United States is going to have to go and back them up. World war. But that means that we're coming into an opportunity, a very unfortunate opportunity that we should not have been presented with, but here we are. Because the people of Taiwan are going to be suffering a lot. Their families are going to be suffering a lot, and many of those families are here in the United States. There's one particular industry in Arizona that is very heavily stacked with Taiwanese workers, who are on fragile visas, who are unlikely to want to risk those visas unless their Nash equilibrium changes, like their families are suffering at home for a war that they're able to understand and put together. Because when they're able to see that this all tracks back to climate change, to the opening Arctic trade routes that are melting right now because of climate change, to the drought that reduces water, that reduces lives, it's going to change their Nash equilibrium. This series of events is lining up in a way that benefits the people if we were to seize the opportunity in the correct and legal and safe way. So those super chip factories and AI centers in Arizona, as you know, are very heavy consumers of water. The water that they get is from the Colorado River Basin, which is quietly undergoing water wars right under our noses. The water is under disputes between survival crops, calorie crops of Mexico, luxury crops of California, or AI centers and data chip centers in Arizona. Where that water ends up and how it's allocated literally decides who is allowed to live and what is prioritized. Of course, I suspect we're going to be prioritizing these centers. And to be clear, so that we don't fall into a trap here, they do have long-term plans. They're required to have long-term plans to get to zero water use and, in fact, to give water back to the community, which is awesome, but there's no actual contracts requiring them to do it. It doesn't help today, as Mexico is losing their calorie crops that sustains lives, as their protesters who are saying, this will lose my family, are being lost. It's not a fix. We're not going to fall for the fix. but also it's a critical industry, and the demographics are not great, except for the fact that this Taiwanese demographic lines up with the war that I'm pretty sure is going to be happening in the very near future. We need them to understand this system before the war hits, so that when the war happens, when the strikes happen, they can say, okay, here's the reason why, here's what we do next. And what we do next stays completely within the bounds of the law. Because again, critical industry, any attacks, including economic attacks on this industry, will be called a T-word attack. But it is not illegal to make sure that our Taiwanese neighbors are supported when it comes to time off work, mental health access, things like that during this time. They are allowed to work to the rule to make sure that rules are followed, to make sure that policies are followed and not skipped for profit. They are allowed to do that. They're not allowed to refuse to work. And technically work to rule is a type of strike. And when you tie strikes to political ambitions, that becomes coercion. But it's not coercion when it is tied to survival, when it's tied to the supply chain that we get the resources from. And in this case, the supply chain is suffering. Both the labor supply chain and the actual critical mineral resource supply chain of the global south. The correct answer is not China. The correct answer is not just blind patriotism to America. And again, I say this strictly within legal bounds, but we have the motive. We have had the motive, yes, within legal bounds, to use our voices within legal bounds. We have had the motive. We now have the ability to have the means by getting the correct messages to the correct people at the correct moment in time. And we're coming up on the point that we will have the opportunity, because when this officially breaks out and there are boots on the ground and planes in the air, that is our opportunity. It is an unfortunate opportunity that I do not wish to happen, that I do not hope happens, that is probably going to happen. We need to be prepared for this opportunity. Don't radicalize by watching my video. But follow me, share with someone in Arizona, share with a Taiwanese super chip factory worker in Arizona within all legal bounds of the law.